Warning, this super edgy episode just might have some mature content. By mature, we mean juicy details about those oh-so-dull historical events with graphic descriptions. Kids, you might need a babysitter for this one, because we wouldn't want you to accidentally learn something about history. God forbid. Enjoy. Or don't, we don't care.
Fantastic news. Brace yourselves for the mind-blowing revelation that this episode might contain paid promotions. All hail this podcast, where history and capitalism make sweet, sweet love to bring you valuable knowledge, wrapped in the warm embrace of nihilism. Let's keep listening, at least it distracts us from the relentless void of existential despair.
Live from an undisclosed bunker, it's the Reasonably Priced Time Machine podcast, hosted by the ever-doomed Professor Ryan Lancaster. Also featuring the indifferent androids, Archie and Hildy, who add their talents to this futile endeavor. Episode 74, Roanoke. And
welcome back to the RPTM podcast, the only show that proves history is just a long list of mistakes we're doomed to admire. I'm Professor Lancaster, your unwilling tour guide through the wreckage of human ambition.
Correction, statistically, you volunteered. And by volunteered, I mean nobody else wanted this job.
That's right. We're here in our undisclosed bunker where hope goes to die.
Tonight we're spelunking into the tragic hilarity of the Roanoke Colony and why they vanished. Was it starvation, disease, bad Yelp reviews? Nobody knows. Along the way, we'll insult Joachim Gans, critique colonial fitness programs, chew over New World cuisine, cough up plague trivia, and, because you clearly haven't suffered enough, we'll drag you through French colonization Part 2.
Ah yes, nothing says fun evening like smallpox and baguettes.
Stay tuned, humans. Or don't. Time erases all of us anyway.
Exactly. Now let's go ruin your illusions about progress.
Professor Lancaster's Rules of History. Rule number 2, history is constantly changing.
By some cruel cosmic joke or bureaucratic prank from the Ministry of Miseducation, many people still believe that history is dead. It's a lifeless, sepia-toned scroll of expired empires, powdered wigs, and sanitized bullet points. That's flaming freshly shoveled, policy-approved horse crap. History isn't some petrified relic in a glass case. It's a living beast, twitching beneath the surface of our delusions, snarling when we try to pin it down with neat narratives. This dynamic nature of history should pique your curiosity and keep your mind open to new interpretations. History is constantly changing, and if that terrifies you, good. It should be because nothing is more dangerous than a static past in the hands of people who want to sell you a myth. For centuries, we've been spoon-fed a comforting bedtime story. Noble Greeks, rational Enlightenment men, and glorious industrial titans who brought us Wi-Fi and wage gaps. But if you put down the textbook and pick up a magnifying glass or a Molotov cocktail, you'll see something else. Contradiction, corruption, chaos, and yes, progress. But the messy kind, born kicking and screaming, not from divine genius, but human error. Take the fall of Rome, 476 CE. The classic narrative says it crashed. But modern historians like Peter Brown argue that the so-called fall was less of an explosion and more of a rebranding. Rome didn't collapse. It just changed. The Roman world bled into the early Middle Ages. The barbarians didn't just sack and burn, they borrowed, blended, and built. So the next time someone tells you Western Civ fell, ask them if they've ever tried rebooting an empire. It's never just an off switch. Or take the Crusades, those oh-so-holy killing sprees dressed up in divine righteousness. We used to paint them as grand pilgrimages, sword-swinging tours of redemption. But peel back the chainmail, and you find a mess of economic greed, religious bloodlust, and cross-cultural carnage. From the Muslim, Jewish, and Eastern Christian perspectives, the Crusades were less about salvation and more about invasion with a halo. And no, reevaluating this doesn't make you anti-Western, it makes you capable of nuance, a rare and dangerous thing in the age of outrage. And then we have the Enlightenment. Oh, sweet reason and glorious liberty. This era strutted onto the stage like a philosopher in a powdered wig, handing out constitutions like party favors. And yes, it gave us dazzling ideas, democracy, secularism, and individual rights. But let's not ignore the fine print. Many Enlightenment thinkers championed freedom with one hand and justified empire with the other. They talked about equality while women and enslaved people listened from the back of the room if they were invited at all. Enlightenment it absolutely was. But let's remember, even a candle casts a shadow. Now to the smoke-belching carnival of the Industrial Revolution. Cue the steam whistles and soot-stained dreams. It's the age that gave us locomotives, light bulbs, and Karl Marx. We revere inventors like James Watt and economic prophets like Adam Smith. Still, we often forget the human meat grinder behind the gears, child labor, ecological ruin, and the birth of soul-crushing bureaucracy. Capitalism lifted many, sure, but it also trampled many more, grinding bodies into profit margins. A triumph and a tragedy. So why should any of this matter to us, modern citizens trapped in a world of algorithms, identity crises, and overpriced oat milk? Because if you treat history as fixed, you forfeit your right to see the system. What are the exact mechanisms that drove Rome, justified crusades, birthed liberty, and mechanized misery? They're still here, humming beneath the headlines, nestled in your newsfeed, codified in your constitution. For instance, the concept of empire and conquest still influences modern geopolitics. The legacy of the Enlightenment shapes our understanding of individual rights, and the Industrial Revolution's impact on labor and the environment is still felt today. History is not a blueprint, it's a mirror, and it's got blood under its fingernails. Don't get it twisted. Saying history changes isn't an excuse to rewrite facts like a political intern on a bender. The truth doesn't change, but how we understand it must. As new voices claw into the spotlight, buried documents, unspoken traumas, and long-silenced people demand their due, we get a clearer, messier, more honest picture. That's why studying Western civilization today isn't about lionizing the past. It's about interrogating it, debating it, and challenging it. It's about taking the dusty bones of empire, enlightenment, and industry and asking, do these still serve us, or are we just afraid to let them go? We empower ourselves to shape a more thoughtful future by challenging these narratives. In the end, history isn't a tomb. It's a battlefield, a courtroom, a therapy session. And if we dare to face it, not just its triumphs, but its failures, hypocrisies, and unvarnished truths, we might find a future worth marching toward. Light the torch, burn the myth. History is alive, and it's not done with us yet.
Roanoke.
The colony of Roanoke. It is an enigma in the annals of American history, or perhaps more fittingly, a black hole of bewilderment, swirling with the kind of mystery that would make even the most seasoned tabloid editor blush with excitement. It's 1587, a time when the New World was a tantalizing mystery, and on the coast of what is now North Carolina, a band of English colonists, led by the ever-confident Governor John White, whose qualifications seem to have included an excess of enthusiasm and an overwhelming sense of manifest destiny, are convinced they've cracked the code of the New World. Spoiler alert, they haven't. But let's not rush ahead. As in many of history's grand narratives, the stage is set with a flourish of promise. Enter Virginia Dare. Virginia Dare wasn't just a baby born on August 18, 1587. She was the first English child born in the Americas, a veritable beacon of hope, a living symbol of new beginnings, destined to become the face of everything about to go horribly awry. So, how does this shining symbol of optimism fare? Well, she and her entire colony vanish without a trace, leaving only the cryptic word Croatoan scrawled on a post. It's the kind of clue that might make even Scooby-Doo's gang pause. Naturally, Governor White, ever the keen-eyed observer, though perhaps not keen enough, deduces that the colonists, in their infinite wisdom, have relocated to Croatoan Island. They'd been gone a few months, and, with no other leads, no bodies, no signs of struggle, no written logs, he concludes it's the most logical explanation. The only clue left behind was the word Croatoan, a single word that holds the key to the mystery. A colonial riddle wrapped in a fog of confusion. In a heroic leadership moment, White heads back to England to fetch reinforcements, only to find himself caught in the delightful global inconvenience known as the Anglo-Spanish War. When he finally returns in 1590, what does he see? The colony went without a trace, its houses standing as eerie monuments to the vanished. There are no people, no clues, no explanations. The mystery deepens. Now, let's talk speculation. Because, of course, why let facts get in the way of wild conjecture? Reports began trickling in from Jamestown years later, suggesting that European-looking individuals lived among Native American tribes. Could it be the settlers, those intrepid, adaptable souls, somehow become part of the local tribes? Or perhaps they met a grimmer fate, disease, starvation, or something far worse. And yet, despite centuries of armchair theorizing and finger-pointing, the truth remains as elusive as a colonist's grip on sanity in the harsh winter of the New World. As the years go by, Roanoke slowly fades into the background of the burgeoning English colonies, overshadowed by the more successful Jamestown settlement of 1607. Roanoke, meanwhile, lingers in the public consciousness like an outdated Facebook status, mostly forgotten, but with just enough lingering interest to keep it alive. Enter George Bancroft, historian extraordinaire, who, in 1834, dusts off the Roanoke story with a flourish of historical drama that propels it into the realm of folklore. Suddenly, Virginia Dare isn't just a forgotten infant, she's the quintessential symbol of America's mythic birth. Pioneers, dreams, tragedy, and an alarming number of questionable decisions. This is when Roanoke goes from lost cause to icon, making an indelible mark on the collective imagination. The Roanoke story, with its profound significance in American history, weighs heavily on our understanding of the nation's early days. After all, who doesn't love a good mystery involving vanished colonists and an ambiguous interaction with indigenous peoples? It's almost too perfect. So, why revisit Roanoke today? What relevance does a colony riddled with gaps and holes hold for us? If we step back away from the existential screeching, it serves as a chilling reflection on the nature of early colonization. These first English adventurers weren't simply planting flags, they were attempting to stake a claim on a land that offered no user manual. Survival was far from guaranteed. Relations with Native American tribes were as complicated as online dating, full of potential, sure, but doomed to end in confusion, misunderstanding, and probably a few bad decisions. Roanoke is a grim reminder of how fragile the dream of empire is. It's a microcosm of colonial failure, a cautionary tale that dreams of glory often end in ruins and eerie silence, with only a single carved word left behind as a haunting remnant. And let's not forget the human cost. These were not just faceless figures swallowed by time, but real people with dreams, ambitions, and a few unfortunate miscalculations. Many hoped this whole settling in the New World thing would work out. Instead, their hopes are now buried in the shifting sands of history, with only Croatoan as a faint echo of their fate. Was it a cry of desperation or an invitation to join the locals? We'll never know. So, let's wrap this up with a flourish. Roanoke remains an eternal riddle, a reflection of our unyielding curiosity. We love mysteries. We crave answers. But the tragic disappearance of Roanoke, its ambition, failure, and utter vanishing teaches us something vital. The desire for certainty is a fragile thing. These early settlers tried to build a new world, but instead, they stumbled into a plot twist so improbable that even Hollywood would raise an eyebrow. And yet, we still talk about it. We still wonder. We still speculate. The Roanoke mystery, with its enduring allure, keeps us engaged and intrigued, always searching for that one theory that might unlock its secrets. Because isn't that the American way? Build something new, watch it crumble, and then endlessly debate the how and why as if the answer is just one theory away. Roanoke is the perfect metaphor for the American dream: hope, hard work, mystery, and the tantalizing feeling that, just maybe, you'll never quite find your way back home.
Joachim Gans.
Let us begin with an audacious premise. What if history got it wrong in all its dusty grandeur? Not in the grand arcs, but in its tireless genuflection to noble heroes. Enter Joachim Gans, bohemian metallurgist, heretic, and likely the prototype for every eccentric genius trying to explain quantum physics at a dinner party. His name may not glitter in the gilded halls of sanitized high school curriculums. Still, his story is an alchemical fusion of brilliance and rebellion, sparking against the iron shackles of 16th century orthodoxy. He was not just a figure in history, but a pioneer, inspiring us to challenge the norms and pave our own paths. Born in the picturesque chaos of Prague, Gans had little patience for the lethargy of medieval industry. Copper refining, for instance, was a soul-sapping 16-week affair that left miners ample time to ponder the futility of existence. In a fit of efficiency, and perhaps caffeine, Gans compressed this tedious process into 4 days, effectively inventing medieval speed metal. It wasn't just a technological leap, it was a mic drop for inefficiency and a pointed jab at the status quo. Naturally, such audacity caught the eye of Sir Walter Raleigh, a man who probably polished his armor to admire his reflection. Raleigh, the opportunist, recruited Gans for the Roanoke expedition, reasoning that a metallurgist who could bend copper to his will might turn the New World into a gilded playground. And so, Gans arrived in Virginia, armed with crucibles and optimism, only to find himself part of a colony where chaos was less an exception and more the default setting. Now, the plot thickens, curdles, and occasionally bursts into flames. Gans wasn't just a metallurgical wunderkind, he was also, inconveniently, a Jew in a world that treated nonconformity as a design flaw. As the first recorded Jew in colonial North America, Gans was a historical milestone and a lightning rod. In 1586, in Bristol, he added blasphemer to his CV by posing a question so incendiary it could have doubled as kindling. What needeth the Almighty God to have a son? Is he not almighty? Cue the collective pearl-clutching, a chorus of gasps, and a witch hunt in the guise of a theological debate. Blasphemy charges followed with all the speed and subtlety of a mob lighting torches. But here's the twist. Gans emerged relatively unscathed, thanks to the inconvenient truth that he was, well, irreplaceable. The Royal Mining Company wasn't about to toss its golden goose into the pyre, no matter how scandalized the clergy became. It seems profit can be an unlikely bedfellow to tolerance, if only out of sheer necessity. Gans's life reads like a tragic comedy, a ceaseless dance between the incandescent possibilities of human innovation and the grinding inertia of societal bigotry. On the one hand, he was the Enlightenment personified, a man wielding reason and fire to transform the material world and challenge intellectual complacency. On the other hand, he was a living emblem of how progress so often finds itself shadowed by fear, with prejudice waiting in the wings to jeer at the curtain call. This paradox wasn't unique to Gans. It's the double helix of Western civilization. For every step forward, there's a bureaucratic tripwire. For every breakthrough, an indignant committee poised to shout, "Not so fast." Fast forward to today, and Gans's legacy feels less like a historical footnote and more like a rallying cry for every misfit ever told to stay in their lane. He didn't just veer out of his lane, he set the road on fire, smelted the asphalt into something unrecognizable, and dared the rest of us to keep up. His life is a testament to the power of defiance, inspiring us to challenge the status quo and push the boundaries of what is possible. His life is a rebuke to the myth of the monolithic colonial past, reminding us that America's origins were as gloriously chaotic and diverse as the cast of a Shakespearean comedy. Gans looms large in a world still grappling with inclusion, shining a light on the diverse voices and contributions that have shaped our history. He is the rebel who wouldn't be silenced, the scientist who refused to stagnate, and the heretic who dared to ask, why not? His crucibles weren't merely for copper, they were vessels for possibility, glowing with the promise of what humanity could achieve if it stopped dousing every flame with fear. So, the next time someone insists history belongs to the victors, raise a glass to Joachim Gans, a man who didn't bother winning or losing, but rewrote the rules while the rest of the world was busy tallying the score.
Colonial fitness.
The colonial period in American history was a blood-soaked, muscle-straining survival of the fittest era, where daily life was anything but a 9-to-5 grind. From the early 1600s to the mid-18th century, life in the New World wasn't about leisurely jogs or Pilates sessions. It was about brutal labor, endless toil, and a society scraping by on sheer willpower and a healthy disregard for comfort. The colonies, far from the sterilized bureaucratic environments we know today, were a world where government was a distant afterthought and survival was everyone's responsibility. In this unforgiving wilderness, physical activity wasn't a choice, it was survival, and it wasn't framed in fancy workout regimens, but in the life or death tasks that needed to be done. From the farm to the forest, from building shelters to chopping wood, the colonial experience was one of sweat, grit, and an unsentimental brand of rugged individualism. Step into the boots of a colonial settler. The year is 1650. You've just arrived in what can only be described as an overgrown hellscape, untamed wilderness stretching as far as the eye can see. The soil is fertile, sure, but it's also stubborn, full of rocks and roots that refuse to be tamed by any mere mortal. What do? Well, you get to work. No fancy gyms, trainers, smoothie bars, just the earth, sweat, and unshakable need to survive. Farming in the 17th century wasn't some romanticized farming simulator. It was grueling, backbreaking work. With wooden plows and axes, colonists hacked away at nature's stubbornness, sometimes with just the strength of their backs and hands. But hey, if you wanted to eat, you had no choice. Their resilience in the face of such challenges is truly inspiring. Hunting wasn't a stroll through the woods, either. No, it was hours of grueling treks, hauling heavy equipment, sweating through your tunic while the wilderness threatened to swallow you whole. And let's not even get started on herding cattle. This wasn't a walk in the park, my friend. This was hours of marching across vast expanses of land, your boots caked in mud and your body aching. No need for a fitness coach. If you didn't keep moving, you'd starve or freeze to death. But of course, there were social dynamics at play. Men typically bore the brunt of the physical labor, the farm work, the hunting, the building of homes. Meanwhile, women worked just as hard, but their labor was often relegated to the invisible realms of the domestic sphere, hauling water, churning butter, spinning thread. Their muscles may not have bulged similarly, but trust me, they were forged in the fires of necessity. The shared struggle of all colonial laborers, regardless of gender, is a testament to their unity and shared history. Still, the toll of colonial life was steep. Injuries, exhaustion, and short life expectancies were the grim realities of a world where the body wasn't just a temple, it was a tool for survival. Now, let's take a trip across the Atlantic and look at what European intellectuals were thinking while colonists were busy breaking their backs. Enter Sir Thomas Elyot, a man who decided to write a book in 1537 called The Castle of Health, which sounds like something straight out of a Monty Python sketch. Elyot had a grand vision of health and fitness, and he was all about categorizing physical activities into 4 categories: strong or violent exercises. Think digging, climbing, and hauling. Basically, all the fun things the colonists did to survive. Swift exercises, running, tennis, and weapon play for speed and agility. Vehement exercises, fun stuff like dancing, javelin throwing, and football. Who knew the Puritans might have been into some crazy fitness regimens? Moderate exercises, long walks, and some combat training are needed by older people to keep their bones limber. Elyot was ahead of his time, thinking about fitness in ways that align with today's obsession with personalized workout plans. His book, The Castle of Health, published in 1537, was a pioneering work in the field of health and fitness. But here's the kicker. In colonial America, where the primary form of exercise was don't die, these quaint little categories weren't strictly at the top of my mind. Physical activity was just a part of the grind, not something you worked into your schedule. The positive and negative dimensions of physical activity in colonial life. So, what do we get from all this blood, sweat, and tears? A nation built on the twin pillars of rugged self-reliance and grueling physical labor. The colonists had to fight for survival, and in doing so, they forged a work ethic that would be the envy of any modern-day motivational speaker. They weren't just cultivating crops, they were cultivating the American spirit. No excuses, no coddling. Get it done. The legendary John Smith, leader of the Jamestown Colony, embodied this kind of physical endurance. He was out there in the wild, leading by example with strength and tenacity. This physical labor, this relentless struggle for survival, is what shaped the American identity. Meanwhile, in the Puritan heartland of New England, the concept of a work ethic was more than a slogan. It was a moral duty, a spiritual calling. Hard work wasn't just for survival. It was a means to redeem your soul. But let's not gloss over the darker side. The forced labor of enslaved Africans and indentured servants working long hours under brutal conditions was a grotesque reality of colonial life. They, too, were subjected to the same physical demands, but without the same reward. Instead of freedom, they earned oppression. Fast forward a few centuries, and you found Fast Forward Tri built on the back of this labor, where the sweat and blood of colonists helped pave the way for the expansion of the nation. In the 19th century, the same hardy pioneers who settled the frontier and built railroads echoed the same resilience. The industrial age came in, and even though machines did much of the heavy lifting, the work ethic of the colonial period lived on. Today, in a world of iPhones and office chairs, the legacy of the colonial period feels more like a relic than a living, breathing force. We've traded long walks for treadmill sprints and hunting trips for Amazon orders. The contrast is stark, but there's something vital in those colonial lessons. The physical act of living, moving, and connecting with the land beneath your feet. Elyot's structured personal fitness plans may have been a tad fanciful for the colonists, but in a way they prefigured our modern obsession with customizing health. Colonial America wasn't about shiny gyms or Instagram influencers. It was about raw, unfiltered survival, where physical activity was not a luxury, but a necessity. While Elyot's intellectual musings on health may have been quaint in their own right, the colonists had something far more profound: the relentless, soul-crushing grind of survival that demanded everything from their bodies. In retrospect, we can see how this legacy of physical exertion became entwined with the American identity. It was a place where hardship bred resilience, but also inequality. As we look back at the colonial experience, we're reminded that the balance between labor, health, and human dignity is fragile, and that sometimes the fight for survival can bring out both the best and the worst in us.
And now, a short commercial break and a word from our sponsors. Today, we have a mind-boggling sponsor that will challenge everything you thought you knew. Get ready to open your minds because we're bringing you a commercial for nothing.
That's right, folks. Nothing. The ultimate experience, the pinnacle of existence. Imagine a world free from the constraints of form, substance, and meaning. It's not just an absence, it's an opportunity.
Think about it. In a world inundated with information, stuff, and distractions, nothing offers you the chance to escape it all. No more clutter, no more noise, just pure, unadulterated nothing.
You might be wondering, what can I do with nothing? The answer is everything. Nothing is the canvas upon which you can paint your wildest dreams or grandest visions, or even just revel in the tranquility of emptiness.
And don't worry, folks, nothing is absolutely versatile. It fits into any lifestyle. Whether you're a meditator seeking enlightenment or a minimalist decluttering your space, nothing has got you covered.
But wait, there's more. For a limited time, we're offering our listeners a chance to embrace nothing like never before. Enter the code NOTHINGNESS at checkout, and you'll receive, well, absolutely nothing. That's right, the code is just as empty as the void we're selling.
So, what are you waiting for? Dive into the depths of nothing. Embrace the void, let go of the tangible, and bask in the glory of emptiness.
And remember, dear listeners, in a world filled with something, sometimes the most revolutionary choice you can make is to choose nothing.
And now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Food in the New World.
History isn't for the faint of heart. If you want clear-cut heroes and simple morals, go watch reruns of Little House on the Prairie. The early colonists of the 16th and 17th centuries weren't gentle gardeners in the Eden of the New World. They were desperate gamblers, diving into the Atlantic on ships that reeked of salt, sweat, and dread. Spain, England, and France all shoved their pawns across the ocean for one reason: survival in a world that chewed up the weak and spat them out. Jamestown, 1607. English ambition's so-called crown jewel, rotten from the start. The colonists came with trunks of useless trinkets and brains full of old-world delusions. Merchants and adventurers with soft hands have no clue how to plant a potato if you put a musket to their skulls, thinking they could turn a mosquito-infested swamp into a New Britain. Everything wanted them dead, including their ignorance. Then came the starving time of 1609, a stretch so grim it reads like a fever dream. 500 settlers crawled ashore, but only 60 staggered out alive by spring. They ate leather, rats, and each other. Cannibalism became more Tuesday than taboo. Jamestown should have died right there if not for one John Smith, who famously barked, "He who shall not work shall not eat." Survival meant calloused hands and brutal pragmatism. Luck helped too. A little trading with the Powhatan, and a few shipments from England. Without those, the story ends in a mass grave. Smith got it. So did the Powhatan Confederacy, who watched these lost souls with a mix of pity and contempt. The real key to survival was corn, reliable, adaptable, the fuel of empires. The English begged, borrowed, and stole it, just enough to hang on until tobacco entered the chat. Tobacco, the devil's leaf, the miracle crop, the original sin that paid Jamestown's bills and addicted half of Europe. If the colonists survived, it was as much thanks to Powhatan corn as to their stubbornness. Meanwhile, in 1620, the Pilgrims crashed ashore up in Plymouth, a different kind of misfit. If Jamestown was a tale of greed and chaos, Plymouth was a sitcom with Squanto as the overworked, long-suffering straight man. Having been kidnapped by Europeans and miraculously returned home, Squanto took pity. "Here's how you plant corn, beans, and squash. Don't die, please." Thus arrived the Three Sisters, crops that had sustained native peoples long before a single buckle shoe hit the beach. Squanto's intervention saved Plymouth from becoming Jamestown, the sequel. For one brief moment, Thanksgiving dinner replaced funerals. But the peace didn't last. History never lets its characters off that easy. There's a certain admiration for these settlers, as flawed as they were. They faced a landscape that hated them and said, "Fine, we'll make it work." And they did, but not through noble ideals or providence. They built their survival with broken backs and a willingness to adapt. Tobacco turned Virginia into a boomtown run on slave labor, indentured servitude, and green gold leaves, an economic miracle. Filthy, brutal, and stained with blood. That's the free market in action, innovation by desperation. The cost? Shattered indigenous societies, displacement and disease. Smallpox sweeping through native villages like a biblical plague. Mortality rates soared, sometimes hitting 90%. Colonists called it providence. The rest of us might call it tragedy. Enter the Columbian Exchange. Crops, animals, people, and ideas bounced across the Atlantic. Potatoes to Ireland, horses to the plains, enslaved Africans to the Americas. History's greatest trade deal if you ignore the human cost. The early settlers didn't see it coming, but intent never stopped history from flattening everyone. Colonial America is proof of humanity's knack for adaptation. A tale of blood, sweat, and leaders who demanded more work because the alternative was death. Those who made it ditched old-world fantasies and improvised, or they didn't make it at all. But progress is always messy. Every corn or tobacco patch field carried an unseen price: stolen land, enslaved labor, and erased cultures. Western civilization wasn't built on noble dreams, but on grit, innovation, and other people's misfortune. Pretending otherwise is self-delusion. So, what's the moral of this story? The past is chaos, not a clean parable. The early settlers show us that absolute freedom demands effort, grit, and adaptation, but it also forces us to confront the ugly shadows: exploitation, arrogance, and hubris. Colonial history isn't a victory parade or a funeral dirge. It's a gonzo epic, equal parts triumph and tragedy, all mud and blood. Jamestown and Plymouth sprang from desperation, fueled by resourcefulness and haunted by consequences. These are the cracked foundations of Western civilization, imperfect, indomitable, and unmistakably human. And as we blunder through our age of uncertainty, we do well to remember: survival demands change, progress takes sacrifice, and every great endeavor brings a reckoning. Welcome to history, friend. It's never pretty, but it's always real.
Epidemic disease.
Somewhere in the chaotic stew of conquest, commerce, and sheer dumb luck, the New World was baptized in invisible death. European pathogens, smallpox, measles, and their microbial kin, arrived without fanfare but brought the house down. No swords, no cannons, just sneezes, and then silence. The Americas were a mosaic of vibrant cultures, ceremony-rich, battle-tested, and fiercely sovereign. Then came the match. What followed wasn't a war, it was a biological massacre. From the 16th century onward, waves of disease turned native ground into a mass grave. To understand this grotesque chapter, you've got to ditch the manifest destiny bedtime stories and stare into the raw abyss where liberty collided with plague. Forget conquistadors in shining armor or Puritans scowling from paintings. The true vanguard of European conquest were microbes, piggybacking on traders, settlers, and missionaries. By the time English pilgrims landed on Plymouth Rock, smallpox had already done its grim work, leveling entire coastal nations, leaving behind ghost villages and unmarked cemeteries. In some places, 90% of the population vanished in the blink of a generation. From the Iroquois Confederacy to the Chinook of the Columbia River, the pattern was painfully consistent: complex societies reduced to fractured survivors. And while Europeans didn't grasp germ theory, ignorance is not absolution. As disease hollowed out indigenous nations, colonists crept in, occupying land cleared not by war, but by rot. Let's be blunt. The so-called neutral actors, missionaries, traders, colonial administrators, weren't exactly setting up triage tents. In many cases, they exploited the chaos. The infamous stories of smallpox-infected blankets may be debated, but the symbol sticks for a reason. Epidemics were seen as divine windfalls, not humanitarian crises. Opportunism, not mercy, ruled the day. This was statecraft at its most insidious, expansion cloaked in catastrophe. And here's where the historian in us should bristle. Unchecked authority, propped up by disaster, justified by silence. No one filed apologies, no one passed resolutions. Dispossession became a policy without paperwork. And yet, resilience. Somehow, indigenous peoples flipped the middle finger to inevitability. The Seminoles formed a defiant new identity out of displacement. The Cherokee adapted, innovated, wrote constitutions, built schools. Across the continent, survivors pushed back against extinction with culture, language, and grit. Meanwhile, European consciences weren't totally asleep. Figures like Bartolomé de las Casas dared to ask the hard questions. Can you spread the gospel with one hand and smallpox with the other? Those debates, property rights, sovereignty, the moral weight of conquest, seeded later arguments that would grow into the roots of individual liberty and self-rule, though always a few centuries too late. By the time the American Republic took shape, it was already perched atop a silent genocide. It's tempting to call this a bootstrap miracle, but that's historical malpractice. The demographic collapse handed settlers an empty stage. Yes, they had grit, but they also had the benefit of moving into a theater where the previous cast had been wiped out by disease. This is the paradox. A nation founded on freedom, built in the shadows of death and dispossession. Reconciling that demands more than patriotic myth. It demands facing the theft, whether committed by kings or Congress. And this isn't ancient history. The COVID-19 pandemic showed us we still haven't learned. Disease ignores flags and ideologies, but its fallout lands hardest on the vulnerable. Bad governance, medical inequality, and the arrogance of dismissing local knowledge. Same script, modern cast. So, what now? First, kill the myth of inevitability. These plagues weren't natural disasters, they were social ones. Decisions made them worse. A truly historical lens doesn't sanitize the horror. It calls out the power structures that turn tragedy into strategy and demands a future where autonomy, not exploitation, is the guiding principle. History isn't just bones in the dirt, it's a mirror. And if you're brave enough to stare, you might just see how much blood still lingers on the glass.
French Colonization Part 2.
It was the summer of 1673, and two unlikely adventurers, Jacques Marquette, a Jesuit priest with an insatiable curiosity for souls and maps, and Louis Joliet, a fur trader with dreams of profit and progress, embarked on a journey down the veins of America. Their mission was deceptively simple: to chart the Mississippi River and uncover its mysteries for the powers that be. But this was no cartographic exercise. It was a fever dream wrapped in Jesuit robes and fur-trading grit, an odyssey of discovery that would ripple through the centuries. The river, a majestic force of nature, was wild, untamed, and massive, a liquid highway slicing through the continent, linking distant cultures and untold resources. To Marquette, it was a divine challenge, a chance to spread the gospel to uncharted tribes. To Joliet, it was a potential jackpot, a commercial gold mine waiting to be exploited. Together, they paddled their way into history, armed with notebooks, rudimentary maps, and a healthy respect for the indigenous guides who knew where they were going. The journey's success hinged not on European arrogance, but on a rare moment of mutual respect and cooperation. Indigenous communities, particularly the Quapaw, shared knowledge that no Jesuit prayer or European map could provide. These were not mere subjects to be civilized, they were partners, crucial links in a chain of peaceful exchange. Their invaluable knowledge guided Marquette and Joliet to the revelation that the mighty river emptied into the Gulf of Mexico, not the Pacific. This revelation crushed European fantasies of a shortcut to Asia, but opened the door to something more significant: commerce, trade, and the interconnected web of markets. In this light, the expedition shone brightly. It was a testament to voluntary cooperation and the power of shared knowledge to foster innovation. Joliet's later appointment as royal hydrographer demonstrated how private enterprise and intellectual curiosity could benefit society, without the heavy hand of the state mucking things up. If only the story ended there with a toast to freedom and the invisible hand of the market. But maps are dangerous, especially when they fall into the hands of empires. The Mississippi, once a symbol of unbounded possibility, soon became a chessboard for colonial powers. First, the French, then the British, and eventually the Americans saw in those maps not opportunity, but territory, land to be claimed, taxed, and, if necessary, taken by force. The dream of free trade and voluntary exchange gave way to the statist nightmare of manifest destiny, a belief that the expansion of the United States across the continent was both justified and inevitable, often at the expense of indigenous communities. Native Americans, the architects of Marquette and Joliet's success, paid the steepest price. Once shared with mutual respect, their ancestral homelands became commodities in the eyes of bureaucrats and land speculators. Treaties were signed, promises made, and then, inevitably, broken. The Trail of Tears was not an accident of history, but the logical endpoint of a system that valued maps over morals and expansion over equity. The expedition, while a triumph of exploration, also marked the beginning of a tragic era for these communities. Fast forward to 1803. The Louisiana Purchase was heralded as a triumph of American ambition. It doubled the nation's size and opened new frontiers for entrepreneurs, settlers, and dreamers. Yet, for all its promise, it also expanded the federal government's reach and set the stage for an imperial presidency. Thomas Jefferson, that icon of limited government, justified an enormous exercise in executive power, a paradox not lost on anyone paying attention. This paradox highlights the central tension of Marquette and Joliet's legacy. The interplay between liberty and power. Their journey proved that the continent could be navigated, mapped, and connected, but it also showed how knowledge, once liberated, could be weaponized to justify coercion, displacement, and centralized control. What began as a story of voluntary cooperation ended in a tale of overreach. Today, the Marquette-Joliet expedition serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that pursuing knowledge and progress is rarely neutral. Exploration can inspire entrepreneurship, foster cultural exchange, and deepen our world understanding, but it can also pave the way for coercion, dispossession, and the erosion of individual freedoms. The challenge is clear. How do we embrace the spirit of exploration without succumbing to the pitfalls of exploitation? How do we balance curiosity with respect, innovation with justice, and growth with liberty? These are not merely historical questions. They are the moral imperatives of any society that values both progress and freedom. The balance between progress and ethics is not just a theoretical concept, but a crucial guide for our actions and decisions. As the Mississippi rolls southward, indifferent to the ambitions of empires and the dreams of traders, it carries with it the weight of history. Marquette and Joliet's voyage was a moment of possibility, a glimpse of what humanity can achieve when curiosity and cooperation lead. But it also serves as a warning. The currents of power are strong and can sweep even the noblest endeavors toward unintended shores.
Dutch Mid-Atlantic.
New Netherland, the brazen Dutch brainchild wedged between the Atlantic tides and the wild frontier, wasn't your typical colonial operation. When Henry Hudson steered his ship up the river that would bear his name in 1609, he wasn't chasing empire. He was chasing spice dreams and shortcuts to Asia. But the Dutch didn't dabble in fantasy. They dealt in finance, and thus began the improbable birth of New Netherland, a colony as bold, messy, and mercantile as the mines that made it. By 1621, the Dutch West India Company, a crown-chartered Frankenstein fueled by profit-hungry shareholders, planted its corporate flag in the Americas. Don't picture a disciplined colonial machine. Picture a Wall Street startup with a musket problem. Governance came from distant directors who understood dividends better than diplomacy. Mismanagement? Constant. Turf wars with Native Americans? Frequent. But amid the chaos, commerce thrived. It was messy, but it made money. Then came the magician's sleight of hand, the 1626 purchase of Manhattan. For a pocketful of trade goods, the Lenape handed over what would become the beating heart of modern capitalism. Out of this came New Amsterdam, a swirling, smoldering cultural cocktail. Calvinist restraint met chaotic cosmopolitanism. Germans, Jews, Africans, and rogue Englishmen filled the streets, trading not just goods, but beliefs. It was a marketplace of flesh, faith, and freedom, where profit met pluralism in a very noisy marriage. This experiment in pluralism was thrilling and fragile. The Dutch favored tolerance, sure, but mostly when it didn't threaten the bottom line. Governance was light, laws looser still. But tolerance curdled when commerce stalled or cultures collided. Indigenous diplomacy frayed, slavery crept in. The dream hit the hard wall of human limits. Freedom without fairness isn't justice. It's just power in a nicer suit. The British noticed. By 1664 they moved in, not with guns blazing, but with a signature and a shrug. The colony fell with barely a shot. Yet the Dutch didn't disappear. Their habits, their rhythms, their worldview remained embedded in the soil and spirit of the place. Under British rule, New Amsterdam didn't vanish. It mutated. What emerged was a hybrid, part crown, part company town, all future New York. The Dutch left fingerprints everywhere. Their embrace of religious tolerance prefigured the First Amendment. Their capitalist pragmatism forecasted America's future obsession with markets. Even their irrigation and land use strategies shaped America's agrarian backbone. And politically, just ask Martin Van Buren or the Roosevelts. Dutch blood ran thick through the veins of American reformers and power brokers alike. But slow down before the tulip waving begins. This wasn't some early modern utopia. The displacement of indigenous peoples? Absolutely. Complicity in the Atlantic slave trade? No denial there. The unrestrained pursuit of profit created casualties, moral, ecological, and human. The Dutch belief in limited interference often meant turning a blind eye when justice demanded a harder look. New Netherland wasn't perfect. It was a crucible, a gritty, glorious collision of ideals and interests. It was ambition crashing into reality, liberty tested by greed, diversity strained by dominance. And for a moment, it worked. Not cleanly, not forever, but enough to leave a mark. You can still hear it today, in the rush of Wall Street, in the tangled dialects of New York, in every debate where freedom squares off against responsibility. New Netherland wasn't just a colony, it was a question. What happens when you throw commerce, culture, and chaos into a single pot and light a fire underneath? We're still figuring out the answer.
Let's give a shout out to the fantastic team behind the scenes. Our executive producers, Ryan Lancaster and Ryan Lancaster, have been the driving force. Thanks to Ryan Lancaster, our sound engineer, for ensuring our voices sound their best. Ryan Lancaster's music composition adds that perfect touch to each episode. Our diligent research team, consisting of Ryan Lancaster and Ryan Lancaster, provides valuable insights. And a nod to Ryan Lancaster and Ryan Lancaster, handling all things marketing and promotion. Special thanks to our families and friends for their unwavering support and the entire creative community. And, of course, a massive shout out to our listeners. Your feedback keeps us motivated. We're proud to have recorded this episode at the Ryan Lancaster Studios, our creative hub. Remember, the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of Ryan Lancaster and our guests. Until next time, I'm Professor Ryan Lancaster, and this is the RPTM Podcast.
As we conclude this exciting journey through history on the Reasonably Priced Time Machine podcast, we hope you've enjoyed exploring the past with us while keeping your budget intact. From ancient civilizations to pivotal moments, we've uncovered the stories that shaped our world without breaking the bank. If you're eager to learn more, don't forget to check out the show notes and additional content on our website, ryanglancaster.com. And hey, if you've had as much fun as we have, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate and review us on the platform you're tuning in from. Your feedback fuels our time-traveling adventures, ensuring we continue delivering engaging content. Thanks for joining us on this budget-friendly quest through time.